You're listening to the audio-only version of Cocktails with Cav, the popular video cast streamed live only on X. Follow us here on Spotify or on X at Cav Literature.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Another week almost in the bag. Time for another great Cocktails with Cav episode. Oh, I tell you what, it is almost May, and here in New Orleans, my pool water is still not warm enough to swim in. I don't know what's going on. It's all like global warming we have going on, I take it. I don't know. Oh, well, please, stick around. We have a great show for you tonight. You know, there's been a proliferation around the internet of independent journalists as creators with Substacks and YouTube channels. And tonight's guests, honored to have them. They've went deep down the rabbit hole, and as independent journalists have uncovered a lot of facts through open source intelligence and public records requests and court documents, and have just dove deep into the Jeffrey Dahmer case, the notorious serial killer. And I tell you what, they're challenging the MSM narrative that we're all familiar with, and it's going to be interesting. I tell you what, stick around. I hope everybody's got a great cocktail for this. A little bit of housekeeping, please. Check our links in the description. Please feel free to support the show. Our Buy Me a Coffee link. Cheap cup of coffee is all it takes to help us keep bringing you great indie creators. And also, please check our merch page. We have a lot of fun with that storefront. Look, grab yourself a Cocktails with Cav glass and have your official drinking glass to enjoy the shows with us. Oh, geez. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, two ladies coming to us, audio only, wonderful ladies, one British, one American, both living in Europe. Please welcome to the stage the Dahmer analysis team, EB and Far. Oh, EB and Far, I'm so glad you could finally join us here on Cocktails with Cav. How are you two doing?
We're good, thank you. It's a pleasure to join you.
Oh, right. Where are you ladies coming to us from?
Right, I'm in the UK. British, obviously you can tell from my accent.
And I'm an American. I live in the EU.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. Well, no, this is wonderful. I tell you, when I first got to know you guys on X, I was really intrigued with your Substack and your YouTube channel that you had going on the Jeffrey Dahmer case. Obviously, probably, historically one of the most hated figures in American society, from the news media, obviously, and the case that surrounded him back in the day. And but one of the things I love about X, obviously, is there's been a plethora of citizen journalism going on, and facts that may not get to people in some narrative that's continually pushed. But you ladies have come across a lot of interesting facts, and I kind of wanted to, well, first of all, heck, the viewers would love to get to know kind of your background and how you got into this.
Okay, I'll start. A little bit about my background. I'm EB. I come from a research and investigation background. I've got some LEO experience as well from back in the day. We're talking nearly 20 years ago now, but yeah, so shout out for any police officers out there. I know what you're facing. I know it's a very difficult job that you're doing. You don't know what to expect each day you're getting out there. But I also have an investigation background. I've been working in fraud investigation for many years now. I'm a chartered professional in my field. I know a lot about investigations and finding fraud, and this case, really intrigues me. It's a unique subject, and it's something that no one's really looked into and found what we have until now. That there's been recent release of public data and declassified information, which has helped us to uncover what we found. There's a plethora of data available today that wasn't available even a few years ago, let alone 30 years ago. As you know, and regarding the question of why we're doing this, because once you find the first discrepancy, Cav, in this story, there's no way back, and we're not the only ones. Many people have asked questions. Many people have tried to make sense and logic of this story, and there's just, to be honest, once you look up close, there are holes at every corner, and we think it's just unfair to people, that have been fed these stories for 30 years and it's just taken for granted, without question. Well, now's the time to question, and that's what we're doing. We've helped to answer many of those questions. And open source intelligence, or OSINT for short, is our friend. We have to remember that. It's one of the reasons that people are turning away from the mainstream media, because it is so biased, and a lot of what's reported, goes unchecked. It's not fact checked. It's up for sale. And no one checks it. We even had one of the members on our subreddit, a professional writer, who actually, told us that articles are all on the news websites for sale, but there isn't a site out there that won't accept guest posts for money. It's that they're paid posts, and they publish stories, and they're not, they're not checked. They're not fact checked. It's that they could basically write anything. People who are getting their news online are getting more propaganda today than ever before. We thought, let's tell the truth out there, and let's get it out there, because we think it's the right thing to do. And more and more people have asked questions and been really impressed by what we found. They've been surprised. Of course it's a surprise, but Jeff's story isn't the only one out there that's now been uncovered.
Right. And I think that's, when you say the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, I believe everybody generally has, basically the story that has been proliferated over and over for, like you said, the last 3 decades. And that's, I think most people haven't even gleaned any other facts other than what's been told, and so that's what I found was so interesting, because like you said, using open source intelligence and having your research background, you guys have uncovered a lot of stuff. And Far, where you what about you?
How did I get into it?
How'd you arrive down this rabbit hole?
In 1991, when the story broke, I didn't pay any attention to it because I didn't have a TV. So I didn't know anything about it. I don't think, even a couple of years ago, I would have been able to ID him from a photo. I watched the Netflix series when it came out. And then I watched a couple of his 2 interviews that he did. The Inside Edition interview he did, and the interview that he did with his father. And something just told me that this guy's not a killer. And I started looking into it. I went over to Reddit. I found a Reddit sub. There's a large Reddit sub that's been there for quite a few years called Dahmer, I guess. And everybody over there believes the official story. And I just started looking into it, and I found a couple of things. At some point, I was watching videos on YouTube of old news broadcasts, and I noticed that a person who was claiming to be the sister of one of the victims was a man in drag. And I thought, well, that's not a woman, that's a man in drag. And this man in drag looks like one of the victims. That's how it started. That's how it started for me. And it turns out, after several months later, we found that he was indeed alive and playing himself. It was his official name as the victim was Eddie Smith. His real name was Ernest Richard Smith, and he was playing his own sister.
It sounds insane, but it's real. It really is. We found state records for him, Cav.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, and I tell you, yeah. So basically, once you guys, like you said, you launched into this rabbit hole and began uncovering these discrepancies in the official narrative of the story, and I'm fascinated by it. That's sort of like we had our little pre-show chat. I'm along on the ride with the viewers for this because it was just a fascinating story and how you began just going down that rabbit hole with the first few discrepancies and then just everything kind of started unraveling from the open source intelligence you had.
That's basically how it happened. You just find one thing and then you just keep looking and looking and looking and you find more and more and more.
Right. And since that time, I mean, you've developed enough information. I mean, you have, let's see, you guys, you have a YouTube channel now with a lot of the information and short videos for people to peruse. And of course, all these links will be in the description of the show for the viewers, but you also have your subreddit you talked about, which apparently is, it's taken on a lot of members and that discussion too as well. But you also have an incredible Substack going that, free for everybody to get involved and go check out the information too. So it was amazing to me, like I said, when I got to beginning to get to know you guys and just to hear some of the facts you've uncovered, and I know, and we'll definitely start going down the rabbit hole with you to hear this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, none of it, we've actually gone through, as we mentioned in our chat earlier on, we've had FOIA requests, we've gone through state records, there's been declassified material. I mean, this is going to the source of the story. It's the story itself, what actually happened. This isn't coming from any other source but the direct source.
Right.
This is the backstory. For example, we asked, it was televised, that Jeff signed 15 guilty pleas. And this is an interesting point because not many people really understand the actual legal process that they use for the so-called trial. We've actually got a very detailed article on that in the Substack, and it's well worth a read because it actually tells you what happened, how they managed to do this. Because to people who are new to this, yes, it sounds so unreal, but people who are interested in true crime, say these kind of stories, that they've been asking questions, because when you look up close, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of holes. So for example, so we did this FOIA request to the Wisconsin Circuit Court, where we asked for a copy of the 15 signed guilty pleas that he allegedly signed during this trial, televised trial. We had a reply in writing from the court saying they don't exist. They don't exist, and we got that in writing from the court. So we got it on there on the Substack, and in the absence of any signed guilty pleas, nobody can say, he killed anybody. Reason for that being is he gave up his right to a preliminary trial. Now, the preliminary trial is the trial before the trial itself, where the judge examines the evidence and sees, agrees if there is a case to bring to trial. That never happened. We've got it on video where his defence attorney, Gerard Boyle, said that there would be a preliminary trial, that it's part of the process. It didn't happen. And because of that, none of that evidence could be checked. It just went straight to the so-called trial. And then he waives his rights. And, by way of doing that, he signs these guilty pleas, but they don't exist. So, and it's things like that. Hole after hole, nothing was questioned. Another thing that we picked up during the review of the legal process is that the so-called defence attorney, he recommended that any biological evidence could be disposed of. and that was 15 days after the supposed arrest, and we got that again on video. Just 15 days after the arrest, Gerard Boyle recommends disposing of the evidence, biological evidence, and that is months before any official trial had even been agreed. So that doesn't happen in the real world. So you can see what I mean.
It violates.
Basically put on this trial where there was no evidence and nothing was questioned. He's got this confession, so-called confession. We've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. The confession's got another man's social security number all over it. And you might ask, do you see what I mean? And the confession was the only item that was used to admit his guilt, because he gave away his rights, his preliminary rights. None of the evidence was questioned. They called it an insanity trial. So nothing could be questioned. Nothing was questioned. So he basically was convicted, if you want to call it that, on the basis of this confession. On this confession. But there's no guilty pleas. The confession's got somebody else's social security number on it. We even found who that social security number belonged to, and it was a guy called I don't know if you can remember his name.
Lamar Stanley.
That's
Eric Lamar Stanley, right?
And
he was almost, yes, he was almost exactly the same age as Jeff Dahmer.
By 1 week.
And I tell you, that is and I highly recommend for the viewers to definitely, check the links after the show and go review some of the material, because like I said, I was fascinated as well. But I guess it would probably help viewers to know, before we get into the some of the meat of some of the material, what maybe it would be helpful for the viewers. What conclusions did you draw, since you've obviously been down this rabbit hole deeper than any of us? And it would probably help the viewers. What conclusions have you drawn, and then we can talk about how you got there maybe after.
The conclusions are that it wasn't a real story. It never happened. The only
fake news story.
We ran background checks on Jeff, verified background checks, and anybody can do this. We ran verified background checks, and he's only got one conviction listed in Ohio for 1978, and obviously that goes back to the first alleged victim, Stephen Hicks. There's nothing listed for Milwaukee, for Wisconsin. There's nothing on there. And we did that on 2 trusted search engines. We used Been Verified and Intellius. So these records are public, and we compared it to another convicted criminal who had a similar conviction to what they alleged of Jeff, and his records show up, and he's also in Wisconsin. So the state does share its records, and as it should.
But they don't share any information about Jeff Dahmer.
Right.
They don't. So there's nothing. So all you'll find, anybody running a background check on him, all they'll find is one conviction listed in Ohio, nothing else.
Right. So obviously, when he, going through all the televised court proceedings and, a lot of the videos of which you have on your Substack and just a great job. It was really thorough. Like I said, I'd highly encourage the viewers to just go check out some of the information and judge for yourself as well. But obviously, having gone through the court proceedings, so is the conclusion that the crimes themselves didn't occur?
No, not the ones in Milwaukee, no, because we also did state record checks and checked the backgrounds of some of these alleged victims. And as Farm mentioned earlier, there was a victim alleged to be called Eddie Smith. When we looked into the state records for that family, we found he did have a sister called Teresa Smith, but Eddie himself doesn't exist. He was Ernest Smith, and then we found his photos. Again, this is all going back to the OSINT conversation I was talking about. So we looked at his state records, compared pictures, and his family history. It lists all his siblings. There's no Eddie. There's an Ernest. There's a Teresa.
Ernest Richard Smith.
Ernest Richard Smith.
Ernest Richard Smith had a felony charge dropped 12 days before Jeff Dahmer's trial started.
Hmm.
And it was
So we think that this was dropped. And then they made a deal that he would participate in this fake news story, and they would drop the felony charge against him. And then he
Okay.
ended up
that as well.
the victim.
So that's the supposition, right? So the idea being that the Wisconsin crimes didn't really occur. So basically, what was your conclusion of why Jeffrey? Which I think everybody would obviously ask.
Oh,
right
this
away
is our most common question, Cav.
Of course,
I'll give you a bit of
obviously.
I'll give you a bit of background. I mean, in a nutshell, I really recommend reading about the trial. Read the Substack. If you're going to read the Substack, look at the trial first. It's actually our first post on there, the peculiar trial, because it explains it exactly how it happened, and the reader will hopefully understand that they did it without actually producing any evidence. There was no evidence. The only evidence that he was charged on as we don't agree that they're real convictions, but the only evidence they used was this faulty confession, and that was it. But if you read our findings, hopefully the viewer can understand that, because we explain it step by step. So do read the legal process breakdown.
And that is available at the top.
Oh,
Sorry.
right.
I just want to say that
And I see what you're talking about on the Substack.
Yeah.
So again, with the, to beg that question, maybe because, I tell you, you ladies are blowing my mind. I need to go refill my cocktail in a second when we go on.
It's mind blowing. It is absolutely mind blowing.
But before we get into it, again, I guess like begging the question, why Dahmer? Why Jeffrey?
We can come
To be
I'll
put
come
through
on
this
to that.
ordeal.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to tell you something very interesting in a minute, Cav. But let me just lead into what led to it. Let me lead into it. So we've got the peculiar trial. We've got 15 signed guilty pleas that don't exist following a request to the Wisconsin Circuit Court. And we got that in writing. We got, 15 missing Social Security death index records. 15 of these alleged victims aren't even recorded in there, contrary to 90s practice. The confession contains another man's Social Security number, which we mentioned. The confession was not taped or video recorded, and we've actually got Detective Murphy on there saying that on video. 60 hours of confession was not even taped or video recorded, Cav. He wrote down what he thought was important. We've got that on video. Jeff was quoting movie lines word for word from the comedy horror written about him in 1992 in his 1993 Inside Edition interview. We got videos on that. Verified background checks show one conviction only in Ohio. We've gone through that. He also had polymyositis, which is an autoimmune disorder, which would have made it impossible for him to carry out any of these acts. We've actually done some digging into that, and we've got reports that confirm that. Again, that's in the Substack. And then why would he do this? Interestingly, that's actually the most popular question that we get. And we actually had a discussion on that on our subreddit a couple of days ago. The most common question, so why would Jeff do this? Why go along with this? Now, interestingly, we found an Allstate insurance claim letter online that's very recently been released. You might not be aware that Jeff Dahmer's father died fairly recently, and people have been to the property. There was even a video of a lady online going through the bins, and I suppose these people want to make money however they want, but there were things that have started to appear on this Cult Collectibles website. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's like a sort of true crime enthusiasts collection site, and they sell various artifacts and such like. And we found this Allstate insurance letter online there for sale, and so we had a look at it. We took a very close look at it, and this insurance claim was made in response to the case of the Hicks family against Jeff Dahmer's family for the wrongful death of Stephen Hicks. Okay, so coming back to why Jeff would do this. Let me just explain it to you. So in November 92, the Hicks family filed a civil action against Jeff and his parents for wrongful death, survival action, intentional and negligent infliction of emotional distress, negligence and loss of consortium, which isn't unusual. A wrongful death or survival action lawsuits, so both types of personal injury lawsuits attempt to compensate the victims and their survivors for their economic and non-economic damages that they've suffered due to an accident. So they made this claim. They can sue for pain, suffering, grief, and such like. A loss of consortium is a legal term used to describe the impact that an accident, fatality has on relationships and, companionship and emotional support lost, and so on. So now, interestingly, this letter to the insurers had additional causes of action made against Lionel, Shari and Joyce, which are Jeff's mother and father and his future stepmother, for negligent entrustment and negligence. Okay, now why that's interesting is one, we're actually in the process of writing a new Substack article about this, Cav. But what we got to understand is a definition of negligent entrustment is particularly important. It's a cause of action in the US under what they call tort law, which arises when the entruster, i.e. Lionel, Shari and Joyce in this instance, are held liable for negligence because they negligently provided another party, the entrustee, that's Jeff in this case, with a dangerous instrumentality. And the entrusted party then goes on to cause injury to a third party with that instrumentality. So the interesting question around that is, what did they entrust Jeffrey with? And another question is, why is Shari named on the lawsuit? And we've actually got a copy of the letter. We've got a copy of the Summit County Court of Common Pleas case summary on there as well. And you can see the names of the defendants and names of the plaintiffs. And, you got Jeff, you got Joyce, you got Lionel, you got Shari, all there quite clearly named on this lawsuit. Okay, so nobody's ever dug into this before. And what they alleged was that his parents knew or should have known that Jeff was deviant and destined to cause injury and death to others. But Shari wasn't his parent at the time. Now, this incident supposedly happened in June 1978. Lionel and Joyce are still married. Okay, so you've got to ask the question, why is Shari on that lawsuit? She shouldn't be on there. She hardly knew Jeff. She was at that time still Lionel's girlfriend, and Lionel and Joyce didn't get divorced until July 1978, and then Shari and Lionel got married in December 1978. So do you see what I mean? It's like when you really look at something close, you've got these charges of negligence and negligent entrustment in addition to the wrongful death suit against the parents and Shari, and you think, why is Shari on there? She had nothing to do with it. And yet, is that right? Did she have nothing to do with it? Why is she on there? Was she directly involved or was she blackmailed? We don't know. But for whatever reason, she's named on this lawsuit and they were all found guilty. Yeah. So it's this sort of thing that we keep coming across and it's there and it's in writing.
That is something that I think, it's like we said in the beginning.
See what I mean? It's
that there's always, I mean, not many people have paid attention to the story, obviously, other than what you saw on the news and go in and when you, and like most other issues, when you dig deeper, you obviously begin to start finding some discrepancies. So, boy, I tell you what, you ladies are making me drink more. I'm glad I'm in a bar. But I tell you what, give us a sec. Let's refill our cocktails, because when we come back, I'd love to just get into letting you ladies pick one thing off your Substack. I'd love to show a video or something that the viewers could just really sink their teeth in and get hooked on the material, just like you.
Lots,
And so, let's refill our cocktails and when we come back, let's dig into that a little bit.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a brief moment during the show just to remind you to please follow us, like and share the stream so more people can get to know these indie creators. And by all means, check my Linktree link at the top of my X profile. I tell you what, all kinds of great information for you, and you'll never miss a great Cocktails with Cav episode. Of course, you can subscribe for free to my Linktree, and we'll have the latest Cocktails with Cav episode, as well as our Spotify audio only podcast link, as well as ways to support the show and all of our other social media links. So again, please check out the Linktree link at the top of my X profile, and also scrolling across to the top of the screen there. Go subscribe for free today and never miss a show.
I'm not even going to pretend to know, like, to be a professional at this, so, I'm just going to talk.
The compulsive obsession with doing what I was doing overpowered any feelings of revulsion.
A compulsive obsession with doing what I was doing overpowered any feelings of revulsion.
I was dead set on going with this compulsion. It was the only thing that ever gave me any satisfaction.
I was dead set on going with this compulsion. It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
It's a process. Doesn't happen overnight.
It doesn't happen overnight.
I killed them to possess them permanently.
I don't know how to put it. Possess them permanently.
Ah. Well, that's something. you ladies are going to have to break down some of this stuff for me there on that video as we came back from break. I'm glad I got a bigger cocktail, so.
He's using a film script there, passing them off as memories. That film is a comedy horror film. Like I say, they started filming not long after the so-called trial had finished. It was a comedy horror, low budget comedy horror, and they finished. It was ready for release by September 1992. You'll see the producer there and the main star in the Maury Povich show, September 1992, promoting the film, and then it was eventually released to video in January 93. And there you see Jeff in 1993 using the movie lines. And he passes them off as memories. He's clearly acting. And that's really just, that's the tip of the iceberg of some of the, things that we found, because they really are mind-blowing. There's just so much. And, it's just people have questioned the logic of the story. And like we mentioned before, he had polymyositis anyway, which is an autoimmune disease, which we found out about. Obviously, the media kept very quiet about that because he wouldn't have been capable of doing what he was doing. You see him at the start of that televised trial looking very thin. He has trouble getting out of a chair. Those are all symptoms. But anyway, going into that, he had polymyositis, and in a genuine trial, if there had been a preliminary hearing, that would have been picked up straight away. That there'd be no case. But obviously, that didn't happen. They couldn't let that happen, and it was never reported. But now it's come to light. He had this autoimmune disease. It made him very weak. It's a muscle wasting disease. It affects the muscles and joints. And that's what happened. And now, we found that out. We found the truth. It's there on reports. And it explains a lot, really. So yeah, there's just so much information out there. And the logic, it's like, they're talking about all these chemicals that he used in this little tiny apartment, and nobody knew for years. And that there's a very interesting post on the subreddit and the Substack as well, exploring the logic of that. It's how can somebody use all these chemicals that he was reported to use without any PPE, for example? There wasn't any evidence of any PPE for a start. It just doesn't happen.
Well, and I think one of the things I'd love to know is, obviously when we talk about the standard narrative that's gone on for for decades. And what reception have you guys gotten, online or in the subreddits and in the, because obviously your subreddit has a huge amount of discussion that's occurring, and what's the general public's take on it when they're in the discussion with?
We've actually been surprised, to be honest, Cav. We've had very little pushback. I mean, we're on other media channels as well, and we've had very little pushback. We've had no real argument, because you can't argue with facts, you can't argue with state records, you can't argue with, legal process, FOIA requests. How can you reject those? It's like rejecting your birth certificate. You can't. And this is what we've been doing. We've had no real challenge. We've had obviously opinions, which are fine, but there's not been any challenge. There's not been any, case for a critical argument, because there just isn't any. The open source intelligence is obviously all legally gathered information, free and paid public sources, and it's, it includes things like public records and court filings, arrests, conviction records, genealogical information, academic papers, census data, publicly available mugshots, news articles, FOIA requests, and so on and so forth, And I think in this information age, there's just so much information out there that just was not available, just a few years ago even, let alone now. But 30 years ago, we couldn't have dreamed of, having this much information. And, it's crazy just how much there is out there on all of us. Big right. Brother's real. There's a lot of data out on all of us. We were able to find the address records of somebody from 1988, for example. It's just all out there, Cav. There's, there's not a lot that's hidden, and new information is coming out all the time. And to be honest, this story hasn't aged very well at all, because the amount of data that's out there now on the record is incredible. And it totally answers our questions. We both had, a bad feeling that this story wasn't what they were telling us, and we were right. But when you look at the evidence, the actual open source intelligence, it's very difficult to argue with that. And people have asked a lot of questions, and we're giving them the answers. We've looked at some of the alleged victims. We found, some state records contradicts what we were told who these people were. Like the example we gave there earlier of alleged victim Eddie Smith, he actually turned out to be a person called Ernest Smith, who had a Class C felony dropped in, just before the trial. And
he died in 1999.
And he died in 1999, yeah.
A little bit of a timing problem, right?
It's crazy, yeah. He had a felony, a Class C felony dropped 12 days before the trial. We found that, the court record for that, and so on and so forth. It's just so...
Richard Guerrero's, alleged victim Richard Guerrero's death certificate from 1960. He died when he was 6 months old from the flu.
Well,
we found that. These are state records. We looked up that family's history.
Texas death certificate. He was born in Wisconsin. Yeah.
You ladies, you ladies went deep in the rabbit hole, I tell you.
Oh yeah. I've got the investigation background, and and Farah obviously has the right background as well. She's an excellent researcher, and if you dig deep enough, if you know where that information is, if you know how to research, where to find it, how to join the dots, it's all out there. And we're putting it out there on the Substack. It's that the videos are out there on YouTube, and we're basically just getting the truth out there. These are facts. It's difficult to argue with facts, and that's why the response has been actually, a surprise. Yes, people are going to be shocked. It is shocking, and some of it might sound crazy to people, but this is the world that we live in,
Well, I don't think there's too much out there that doesn't sound crazy nowadays. That's for sure.
Exactly. It's all a show. It's a spectacle, isn't it? We see all the other spectacles around us, and you think, why do they do it? But anyway, going back to why Jeff would do this, this Allstate insurance claim that the Hicks family made, a £50 million lawsuit against Lionel Dahmer's home insurance. And the reason they do that is because you've got liability cover under your home insurance. And so they made this lawsuit. Let me just explain it to you. Hold on a second, just going through my papers here. So why was a claim made against Lionel's home insurer? It's because home insurance policies provide cover for liability protection. So it's liability coverage when someone not living with you is injured while on your property. So in this instance, we say this is Stephen Hicks, the first alleged victim. And then if you're sued by an injured guest, then you're responsible for the injury. Then the insurance will help pay for your legal costs. So this is why there was a claim made. It's got to be a negligent action. It can't be for an intentional action. So that's why you got, the negligent allegations there against the parents, against Jeff. So that's how it happened. So anyway, there was this court case. They won. The final damages, we can't say for sure what the judge decided there. But interestingly enough, that the judge also ruled on the criminal case. But yeah, we believe that Jeff took part because his parents were implicated somehow. Whether by choice or not, we can't be sure, but his parents are named on that lawsuit for a reason. And they have allegations of negligence and negligent entrustment in addition to other allegations along with Jeff. So we believe that he took part to protect his parents. They say that they say that he was left alone. In the next Netflix show, they say he was left alone for 3 months. That isn't true. His mother didn't actually leave until the end of August 1978, and then Jeff went to university. So he was never alone. And I think the problem was that his mother could be implicated as well. She could be accused, of covering up, hiding the body. She could be implicated. So I think, we think that he did it to protect his parents, to protect his mother. And stop putting her, not to put her at risk.
Are you ladies saying we shouldn't believe everything we see on Netflix documentaries? I don't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That goes without saying. I don't
understand. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
well, ladies, there is so much material, and ladies and gentlemen in the audience, look, I highly recommend. Like I said, I was intrigued. Go give. If you haven't got to know EB and FAR on X, you obviously can follow them on with other great citizen journalists on X. I love X. X is getting big with this, getting information out to people. But the Dahmer case, a critical analysis, your handle, I believe, is just at Dahmer Analysis with the underscore there.
That's right.
But please, ladies and gentlemen, go give them a follow. Also, please, their Substack, as well as their Reddit, their subreddit is out there for you. All the links will be in the description of the show. And I tell you, there's just so much information that I think, all of you, hey, if you're interested in true crime and just the fascinating rabbit hole of unraveling some of the facts that you think of the case, that's just been pushed out over the last 3 decades. I haven't finished going through all the information myself, but from what I've seen, it's all intriguing. And you ladies have just, I will say that, with your research background, EB and FAR, going down the rabbit hole and being thorough with actual documents and FOIA requests and government printouts on your Substack. It's a fascinating read, ladies and gentlemen, so I highly recommend it.
Can I just say one thing before we end the show?
Oh, please, FAR, go ahead.
Sure. On the video of all the matches where he's reading lines from the movie, at the beginning and the end, those are outtakes that somebody leaked. Those are outtakes, and in the one he says, I'm not even going to pretend that I'm a professional. I'm just going to talk. It's almost like he's telling, I'm not a professional. Okay. and the end where he asks Nancy Glass if she's seen a movie. Did you see that movie, that helicopter movie? That was also an outtake. Somebody leaked those.
Geez, I tell you what, it's a good rabbit hole. It's a real good rabbit hole. But ladies and gentlemen, please go give EB and FAR a follow on X, at Dahmer Analysis. check out their Substack, check out their YouTube channel. A lot of fascinating material. And ladies, I can't thank you enough for driving me to drink yet one more show.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And you know what? You know what, Cav? There's one thing to take away from this is that never be afraid to ask questions. If something doesn't feel right, it usually isn't. Critical thinking as well, I think, is a huge skill that's lacking in a lot of our society. Critical thinking, as you may know, calls for a persistent effort to examine any belief or, supposed form of knowledge in the light of the evidence, and that's the important word, the evidence that supports it, and the further conclusions to which it tends. So, it's all about the evidence. It's all about the research. It's all about asking questions, finding out, and just challenging that narrative. Don't believe everything that you're told on the TV. Don't believe everything, especially that the MSN tells you, and for certain, don't believe Netflix. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Always ask questions.
Well, ladies, I tell you what, to wrap up a show with that solid advice to the citizenry and viewers of our show, I couldn't endorse that more anyway. Go do your own thinking and looking, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Cav.
Oh, thank you, ladies. Cheers.
You're welcome. Take care.